In the spring of 2019, a 9-year-old girl named Isabella sat in her family's living room in suburban Chicago, flipping through a fashion magazine her aunt had left behind. She paused at a spread featuring haute couture gowns, her finger tracing the elaborate beadwork on one particular dress. Her mother, Maria, noticed the sudden stillness in her daughter's posture. Isabella looked up, her dark eyes distant. "I used to make dresses like this, but better, more alive." Maria felt something shift in the air between them. Her daughter had never shown particular interest in fashion beyond choosing her own clothes. She certainly had never spoken about making anything remotely resembling high fashion. Isabella continued, her voice taking on an unusual quality, almost dreamlike. "There was a mansion in Miami. I could see it perfectly. The gates were gold, real gold. There was a courtyard with a pool that had these incredible mosaics at the bottom, Mediterranean patterns. I designed them myself." Maria exchanged a glance with her husband, Robert, who had just entered the room. Their daughter was describing something with a level of detail that seemed impossible for a child who had never been to Miami, who had never shown interest in architecture or interior design. Isabella stood and walked to the window, as if seeing something beyond the ordinary suburban street. The bedroom faced the ocean. I could hear the waves at night. There were silk curtains, custom-made, pale gold. They moved in the breeze from the terrace. Over the following days, Isabella's statements became more specific and more disturbing to her parents. She began drawing the layout of the mansion she claimed to remember, marking rooms with surprising precision. She sketched fashion designs with an eye for proportion and detail that seemed beyond her years. She described the feeling of fabric between her fingers, the weight of scissors, the satisfaction of seeing a vision transformed into reality. But it was when she began describing the final moments of the life she claimed to remember that Maria decided to seek help. "I was on the steps, the front steps of the mansion. It was morning, early. I was returning from a walk. There was someone there, someone who shouldn't have been there." Isabella's hands trembled as she drew. "I felt confused at first, then pain, then nothing." Maria contacted Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a psychologist at Northwestern University who had published research on childhood past life memories. Dr. Rodriguez agreed to meet with Isabella, intrigued by the specificity of the child's claims and the apparent distress they were causing the family. During their first session, Dr. Rodriguez used careful, non-leading questions to explore Isabella's memories. She asked Isabella to describe the mansion without showing her any images or providing any context. Isabella closed her eyes and began to speak in that same distant voice. The entrance had these huge wooden doors, dark wood. There were columns, white columns. Inside, the floor was this incredible marble, black and white in a pattern. There was a grand staircase that curved. The banister was gold-plated. Dr. Rodriguez recorded every detail, her expression neutral, but her pen moving rapidly across her notepad. She had studied the Versace mansion case, the 1997 murder of fashion designer Gianni Versace on the front steps of his Miami Beach estate, Casa Casuarina. She knew the mansion's layout from published photographs and architectural records. What Isabella was describing matched those records. But Dr. Rodriguez was cautious. The mansion had been featured in numerous publications over the years. Isabella could have been exposed to images without remembering the source. She decided to dig deeper. "Can you tell me about the rooms that weren't photographed very often?" "Private rooms." Isabella opened her eyes, focusing on something Dr. Rodriguez couldn't see. "My bedroom. There was a particular painting above the bed. It showed Medusa. I was fascinated by that myth. The person who could turn people to stone with a glance. The painting was commissioned. Not many people saw it. It was personal." Dr. Rodriguez made a note to verify this detail. She moved on to questions about the fashion work Isabella claimed to remember. "Tell me about designing clothes. What was that like?" Isabella's entire demeanor changed. Her posture straightened. Her hands moved expressively. "It was everything. Every piece was a story. I would see the fabric and know immediately what it wanted to become. There was this one collection. It was inspired by Byzantine art. Gold, So much gold. Heavy embroidery. I wanted people to feel like royalty when they wore my designs. She described specific techniques, terminology that Dr. Rodriguez later verified with fashion historians was accurate to Versace's actual design process. She talked about draping, about the importance of cut, about how a garment should move with the body. Over several sessions, Dr. Rodriguez compiled an extensive record of Isabella's statements. She was particularly interested in details that wouldn't have been widely publicized. Isabella described the mansion's library, claiming it contained rare books on art and design. She mentioned a particular volume on Leonardo da Vinci that she said she consulted frequently. She described the weight of the book, the quality of the paper, the specific illustrations it contained. Dr. Rodriguez contacted architectural historians who had documented Casa Casuarina. After examining estate records and photographs from private collections, they confirmed that Gianni Versace had indeed owned a rare edition of a book on Leonardo da Vinci, and that the library Isabella described matched the actual space in remarkable detail. The investigation took a more personal turn when Isabella began describing relationships. There was my sister, Donatella. She understood the vision. We were so close. Isabella's voice became emotional. She would wear my designs before anyone else saw them. She had this incredible presence. Blonde hair, strong features. She could make anything look powerful. Maria felt a chill. Her daughter was describing Donatella Versace with an intimacy that seemed impossible. Isabella continued. And my brother, Santo, he managed the business side. I trusted him completely. He kept everything running so I could focus on creating. Dr. Rodriguez asked Isabella to describe specific interactions with these siblings. Isabella spoke about working late into the night with Donatella, about disagreements that were always resolved because of their fundamental respect for each other, about Santo's steadiness that provided security. Dr. Rodriguez decided to introduce a verification test. She gathered photographs of multiple fashion designers from the 1980s and 1990s, including several images of Gianni Versace at different ages, mixed with similar-looking individuals. She asked Isabella to identify which person she believed she had been. Isabella studied the photographs carefully. She pointed immediately to a photograph of Versace from 1995. That's me. But I look tired there. This was during a difficult time. The business was growing so fast. There was pressure from every direction. She then pointed to an earlier photograph from the 1980s. This is better. This is when everything felt possible. The creativity was just flowing. Dr. Rodriguez noted that Isabella not only identified the correct person, but provided emotional context that matched biographical information about Versace's state of mind during those specific periods. The most striking moment came during a session in Dr. Rodriguez's office when Isabella suddenly froze, staring at a book on the shelf. That print, the Medusa, that was my symbol. Dr. Rodriguez had deliberately placed a book featuring Greek mythology on her shelf, its spine showing the Medusa symbol that had become synonymous with the Versace brand. Isabella's reaction was spontaneous and emotional. She began describing the evolution of the logo, how she had chosen Medusa because of the myth's power, because of what it represented about beauty that could stop you in your tracks. She drew the logo from memory, getting the proportions and details correct despite claiming to have never studied it specifically. Dr. Rodriguez expanded her investigation to include other researchers who had studied past life memory cases in children. Dr. James Morrison from the University of Virginia's Division of Perceptual Studies reviewed the documentation. He was particularly interested in Isabella's ability to describe locations and events that weren't in the public record. Morrison interviewed Isabella himself, using a different approach from Dr. Rodriguez. He asked her to describe the morning of July 15, 1997. Isabella's reaction was immediate and visceral. She began to shake. I don't want to talk about that. But Morrison, gentle but persistent, explained that understanding this memory might help Isabella process whatever she was experiencing. She finally began to speak, her voice barely above a whisper. I had been at the news cafe. I went there for coffee and magazines. It was a beautiful morning. I walked back to the mansion. I was thinking about the next collection. There were ideas forming. I got the steps. I was reaching for my keys. Then I saw him. A young man. He looked strange. Out of place. Something in his eyes. Isabella's breathing became rapid. Dr. Rodriguez moved to comfort her, but Isabella continued. He raised something. A gun. I didn't understand at first. Why would someone? Then the pain. It was so fast. I remember falling. The steps were hard. I could see the sky. So blue. Then I couldn't see anymore. Morrison documented everything, noting that Isabella's description matched witness accounts of Versace's final moments, accounts that hadn't been widely circulated in detail. The investigation turned to verification of facts that Isabella couldn't have reasonably known through normal means. Dr. Rodriguez contacted former associates of Gianni Versace through careful intermediaries, never revealing the full nature of the inquiry. She asked about private details of the mansion, about Versace's personal habits, about unpublished aspects of his design process. Time and again, Isabella's statements aligned with the information provided by these sources. She had described a particular ritual Versace had of sketching early in the morning, before the household was fully awake, working in a specific room with particular lighting. Former staff confirmed this habit. She mentioned a favorite fabric supplier in Milan, naming the shop and describing its location. The supplier's name appeared in estate records, but had never been published. Maria and Robert struggled with what to make of their daughter's experiences. Robert, an engineer by training, approached the situation with skepticism tempered by concern for his daughter's well-being. Maria, more spiritually inclined, found herself researching reincarnation and consciousness studies. They watched as Isabella seemed to carry the weight of memories that weren't hers to carry. She developed an unusual sensitivity to certain stimuli. She would become emotional when hearing Italian opera, claiming it reminded her of her mother. She showed an inexplicable knowledge of Milan's geography, describing neighborhoods and landmarks she had never visited. She would sometimes lapse into Italian phrases, despite having never studied the language formally. Dr. Rodriguez organized a session where Isabella was shown fabric swatches and asked to comment on them. Isabella's responses demonstrated knowledge that seemed beyond her years. She identified silk qualities by touch, distinguished between different weaving techniques, spoke about how certain fabrics would drape or hold structure. Fashion historians later reviewed the recordings and confirmed that Isabella's assessments aligned with professional-level expertise. She described the proper way to cut bias, the importance of grain lines, the technique for creating certain types of pleating. One fashion educator remarked that Isabella was describing techniques that would typically take years of study to master. The psychological impact on Isabella became a central concern. She was experiencing what Dr. Rodriguez termed identity confusion, moments where she wasn't sure where the memories ended and her own current life began. She would sometimes refer to Donatella as my sister before catching herself and correcting to the designer. She spoke about feeling trapped between two worlds, carrying the weight of a life that had ended violently while trying to be a normal 9-year-old girl. Dr. Rodriguez worked with the family to help Isabella integrate these experiences, teaching her grounding techniques and helping her establish boundaries between past life memories and present reality. In one particularly revealing session, Isabella created a fashion design on paper. She sketched with confidence, her lines assured and purposeful. The design showed a gown with elaborate beading, a silhouette that was both classical and modern. Dr. Rodriguez showed the sketch to a fashion historian who specialized in Versace's work. The historian's assessment was startling. This design shows understanding of Versace's aesthetic principles. The way the embellishment is distributed, the proportions, the sense of movement. It's consistent with his design language. If I saw this in an archive, I would believe it was an early sketch from his studio. The historian paused, studying the drawing more carefully. But the execution suggests someone still developing technical drawing skills. It's as if the design vision is sophisticated, but the hand creating it is still learning. Dr. Morrison introduced another verification approach. He obtained photographs of the interior of Casa Casuarina from a private archive, images that had never been published publicly. These showed specific details of rooms, furniture arrangements, and decorative elements. He asked Isabella to describe what she would expect to see in various rooms of the mansion. Her descriptions matched the photographs with accuracy that Morrison found difficult to explain through conventional means. She described the placement of specific art pieces, the arrangement of furniture in private spaces, even the view from certain windows. When Morrison finally showed her the photographs, Isabella's reaction was emotional. That's it. That's exactly how it was. She pointed to specific details. This sculpture, it was one of my favorites. I would walk past it every day. The investigation expanded to include Dr. Linda Chun, a neuroscientist interested in memory formation and consciousness. Dr. Chun conducted brain imaging studies with Isabella while she recalled these past life memories. The scans showed activation patterns in regions associated with episodic memory, the same areas that activate when people recall their own lived experiences. Dr. Chun was careful to note that this didn't prove reincarnation, but it did suggest that whatever Isabella was experiencing, her brain was processing it as genuine memory rather than imagination or confabulation. The quality of the memory, as evidenced by the neural activation, was consistent with authentic recall. As the research continued over months, patterns emerged. Isabella's memories were most vivid and accessible when she was relaxed and unpressured. They became less accessible when she was stressed or when researchers pushed too hard for details. This pattern matched what other researchers had documented in similar cases. Dr. Rodriguez noted that Isabella never appeared to be performing or seeking attention. If anything, she seemed burdened by these memories, uncomfortable with the attention they brought. During sessions where researchers tested her with leading questions or false information, Isabella consistently rejected incorrect details, suggesting she wasn't simply agreeing with whatever was suggested to her. The case attracted attention from the broader research community. Dr. Rodriguez presented preliminary findings at a conference on consciousness studies, carefully maintaining Isabella's anonymity. The response was mixed. Some researchers found the evidence compelling, particularly the verified details about private spaces and unpublished information. Others argued that Isabella might have been exposed to this information through sources her family wasn't aware of, perhaps through internet searches or conversations she'd overheard. Dr. Rodriguez acknowledged these possibilities, but noted that the investigation had been designed to account for such explanations. The details Isabella provided weren't readily available through casual research, and many had required accessing archive materials and interviewing people who had known Versace personally. One of the most intriguing aspects of the case emerged when Isabella began describing emotional experiences rather than just factual details. She talked about the feeling of being misunderstood by critics who dismissed her work as merely decorative or excessive. She described the satisfaction of seeing someone transformed by wearing one of her designs, the way confidence could be literally tailored into a garment. She spoke about the loneliness that sometimes accompanied success, the pressure of constantly innovating, the fear that inspiration might one day simply stop coming. These emotional descriptions matched interviews Versace had given before his death, capturing not just facts, but the felt experience of a life dedicated to artistic creation. Maria began documenting the impact these memories had on Isabella's current life. Her daughter developed an interest in drawing and design that seemed to emerge from these experiences. She spent hours sketching, creating fashion designs that showed sophistication beyond typical childhood artwork. But she also struggled with anxiety, particularly around violence and safety. The memory of the shooting haunted her. She became hyper-vigilant about strangers, about sudden movements, about being in public spaces. Dr. Rodriguez worked with a child therapist to help Isabella process these fears, treating them with the seriousness they deserved regardless of their origin. The investigation reached a crossroads when Dr. Rodriguez attempted to verify one of Isabella's most specific claims. Isabella had described a particular journal that Versace kept, not for business, but for personal reflections and design ideas. She described its appearance, its contents, even sketches it contained. Dr. Rodriguez, through careful networking, eventually made contact with someone who had access to Versace estate materials. After months of negotiation and explanation, she was allowed to view certain personal items under strict confidentiality agreements. Among them was a journal matching Isabella's description in remarkable detail. The handwriting, the sketches, the mixture of Italian and English, the specific design ideas, all aligned with what Isabella had described. The estate representative, unaware of the full context, mentioned that very few people knew about this particular journal's existence. As Isabella approached her 10th birthday, something began to shift. The memories started to fade, becoming less vivid and less intrusive. She described it as watching something slowly disappear into fog. Dr. Rodriguez documented this process, noting that similar patterns had been observed in other past life memory cases. Children who reported such memories typically saw them fade as they grew older and became more firmly rooted in their current identity. Isabella expressed mixed feelings about this. Part of her was relieved to feel the weight of those memories lifting, but another part felt she was losing something important, a connection to a creative legacy that had defined her recent experience. Dr. Rodriguez compiled her findings into a comprehensive case study. She concluded that Isabella's experiences represented one of the most well-documented cases of childhood past life memories she had encountered. The specificity of verified details, the consistency across multiple sessions, the emotional authenticity, and the child's clear distress all suggested something worthy of serious investigation. Whether this constituted evidence of reincarnation, some form of inherited or transfer memory, or something else entirely remained an open question. But Dr. Rodriguez argued that dismissing the case without thorough investigation would be a failure of scientific curiosity. The family decided to gradually withdraw from active research participation. They wanted Isabella to have the space to develop her own identity without the constant scrutiny of researchers and the weight of these extraordinary claims. Maria continued to document her daughter's experiences privately, creating a record that might one day help Isabella understand what she had gone through. Robert, who had remained skeptical throughout, found himself unable to fully explain away what he had witnessed. The details, the emotion, the consistency, it had challenged his materialist worldview in ways he hadn't anticipated. Isabella's memories of being Gianni Versace continued to fade, but left lasting impressions. She maintained her interest in fashion and design, though she approached it now as a child exploring her own creativity rather than carrying the weight of a past life's legacy. She spoke Italian with her grandmother, who had emigrated from Italy, finding comfort in a language that felt both foreign and familiar. She developed a particular sensitivity to beauty in everyday things, to color and form and the way objects could tell stories through their design. Whether these were remnants of past life memories or simply aspects of her own emerging personality, no one could say with certainty. The case remains in Dr. Rodriguez's files, a testament to the mysteries of consciousness and memory that continue to challenge our understanding of human experience. She shares it cautiously with fellow researchers, aware that it raises more questions than it answers. What is memory? What is identity? Can consciousness persist beyond a single lifetime? These questions, ancient and profound, find new expression in the specificity of a child's detailed recollections of a life that ended on mansion steps in Miami over 2 decades ago. For those of us who seek to understand the full spectrum of human consciousness, cases like Isabella's demand our attention. They challenge the boundaries of our explanatory frameworks and invite us to consider possibilities that may seem impossible until confronted with evidence that won't fit comfortably into conventional understanding. Whether Isabella truly remembered being Gianni Versace or whether something else equally extraordinary was occurring, the case reminds us that consciousness remains one of the great mysteries we have yet to fully unravel. If you're fascinated by these investigations into past life memories and the mysteries of human consciousness, subscribe to our channel. We continue to explore documented cases that challenge our understanding of identity, memory, and the possibility that consciousness extends beyond the boundaries we've traditionally accepted. Join us as we investigate these extraordinary claims with rigor, compassion, and an openness to possibilities that might reshape how we understand human experience.